It was a busy Monday morning at the county courthouse. The hallways were full of people waiting for their cases. Some looked nervous, others bored or annoyed. Lawyers carried files under their arms, and security officers checked people at the entrance. Everything seemed normal, just another day. In the back row of one courtroom sat Monique Harris, a tall, confident black woman in her early 30s. She was dressed in jeans and a light blazer. Nothing about her appearance gave away her job or position. She looked like any other visitor, calm, quiet, and respectful. Monique wasn't there for herself. She was there for someone else, a friend whose younger sister was the victim in a domestic abuse case. The young woman had been through a lot, and Monique wanted to be there for moral support. Though Monique was a deputy sheriff, she was off duty and had come just as a friend, not in uniform and not in an official role. Her friend sat beside her, hands trembling slightly, eyes fixed on the front of the courtroom. Monique leaned in close and whispered a few soft, encouraging words. "You're strong. Just breathe," she said. That whisper, quiet and kind, was meant only for her friend's ears. But it caught the attention of Officer Daniels, a white male officer assigned to courthouse security. Daniels had only recently been transferred to this location and was eager to show he was in control. He noticed Monique whispering, and without knowing the context, assumed she was causing a disturbance. He didn't ask what was going on. He didn't ask if everything was okay. He didn't pause to consider that she might have a reason to be there. Instead, Officer Daniels began walking quickly down the side aisle of the courtroom, his eyes locked on Monique. Monique noticed him, approaching but didn't think much of it. She thought he might be doing a routine check or perhaps speaking to someone near her. But when he got to her row, he didn't speak quietly. Instead, in a firm, loud tone, he said, "You need to leave the courtroom." Monique looked up, surprised. "Excuse me?" "I said you need to leave. You're disrupting court." "I wasn't disrupting anything," Monique said calmly. "I was just talking quietly to my friend. The judge hasn't even entered yet." Daniels didn't want to hear it. "Let's go," he said, motioning toward the door. Around them, a few people turned their heads. The courtroom wasn't full yet, but it was clear others were now paying attention. Monique remained seated. "I don't think I've done anything wrong," she said. Daniels took a step closer and, without warning, reached down and placed his hand firmly on her arm. "I said let's go," he repeated, clearly getting impatient. At that moment, something shifted. Monique didn't panic, she didn't raise her voice, she didn't argue. Instead, she took a deep breath and slowly reached into her purse, which was sitting on her lap. Officer Daniels immediately became tense, watching her hands closely. Monique, still calm, pulled out her wallet and opened it in front of him. Inside was a gleaming gold sheriff's badge and a professional ID card with her name and photo. Deputy Sheriff Monique Harris. She looked him in the eye. "I'm a deputy. I'm here off duty supporting a friend. You're making a mistake." Daniels froze. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. His hand was still on her arm, but now he quickly pulled it back. His face changed. The confidence and authority in his voice disappeared, replaced by surprise and something else, embarrassment. People around them were now fully watching the exchange. One man whispered, "She's a sheriff?" A woman 2 rows up gave a small shake of her head, clearly disapproving of how it had been handled. At the front of the courtroom, the judge had just entered and noticed the small crowd forming in the back. She banged her gavel lightly. "What's going on back there?" the judge asked, her voice echoing through the quiet room. Officer Daniels stepped back and said nothing. Monique stood not to leave but to address the judge respectfully. "Your Honor," she said, "I was just supporting my friend here. Officer Daniels mistakenly believed I was causing a disruption. I've shown him my credentials." The judge gave Daniels a sharp look. "Is that correct, officer?" Daniels nodded slightly. "Yes, ma'am. My mistake." The judge glanced around the courtroom, then back at Monique. "Deputy Harris, you're welcome to stay. Please be seated." Monique nodded and sat back down. her friend looking at her with a mix of gratitude and shock. The moment passed and court resumed, but a quiet tension remained in the air. Though Monique had handled it with grace, what had just happened didn't sit right with her, or many of the people watching. She had done nothing wrong. She hadn't raised her voice or caused trouble. And yet, she had been singled out and nearly escorted out of the courtroom simply because someone misread her quiet support as inappropriate behavior. She couldn't help but wonder, what if she hadn't had her badge? What if she'd been just another woman sitting in the back row trying to comfort a friend? As she sat silently, listening to the first case being read, her mind wasn't only on her friend anymore. It was on something bigger, something deeper, something she knew she would have to address later. After the court session ended, Monique and her friend quietly stepped outside the courtroom. The hallway was still crowded, but the mood felt different now. A few people gave Monique respectful nods. Others looked away, perhaps unsure of what to say after what had just happened. Monique's friend gave her a grateful smile. "I don't know what I would have done if you weren't there," she said softly. Monique smiled back, but her mind was already racing. The incident with Officer Daniels kept replaying in her head. She hadn't come to court expecting trouble. She hadn't come to be noticed. She was simply trying to support someone who needed help. But somehow, she had ended up being treated like she didn't belong. They made their way to a nearby bench and sat down for a moment. Monique checked her phone. A few of her colleagues had already texted her asking if the story they were hearing was true. Apparently, word had spread fast. She typed a quick response. "Yes, I was mistaken for a disturbance in court. All calm now. We'll explain later." After helping her friend to the car and making sure she was okay, Monique returned inside. She wanted to speak with someone from courthouse administration. She wasn't looking to get anyone in trouble, at least not yet. But she felt it was important to speak up. As she walked down the long hallway toward the security office, she passed a few officers. Some gave her a smile or a nod. A couple glanced at her badge clipped to her belt. They knew who she was now. It was interesting, she thought, how differently people looked at her with the badge showing. When she reached the office, she asked to speak with the supervising officer on duty. Soon, a kind-looking woman named Sergeant Elena Ramirez came to meet her. "Deputy Harris," Sergeant Ramirez said. "I just heard. Do you want to come in and talk?" Monique nodded, and they stepped into a small office with a desk, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet. Monique explained everything: how she had come quietly to the hearing, how she had whispered to her friend, and how Officer Daniels had assumed she was causing a problem. She also described how he reached for her without giving her a chance to explain herself. Sergeant Ramirez listened carefully. She didn't interrupt, and she took notes as Monique spoke. When Monique finished, she sat back and waited. "Sergeant," Ramirez sighed. "Thank you for telling me. That shouldn't have happened. You did nothing wrong. Officer Daniels is new here, and maybe he was trying to be extra careful. But that's no excuse for not asking questions before taking action." Monique nodded. "I'm not filing a complaint, at least not right now. But I want to make sure this isn't happening to other people. If it could happen to me with a badge in my bag, what's happening to those who don't have one?" The sergeant looked thoughtful. "You're right, and I appreciate how calmly you handled it. I'll speak with him today. We'll review the body cam footage too, and if you want to speak with someone higher up, I'll help arrange that." "Thank you," Monique said. "That means a lot." Later that afternoon, Monique returned to her own station at the sheriff's department. By then, several people in the building had heard about the courtroom incident. Some of her fellow deputies came by her desk to check in. One of them, Officer Ray Johnson, leaned over and whispered, "So the new guy tried to kick out a fellow officer? That's awkward." Monique gave a small laugh. "It's not funny, Ray. I know," he said. "But it's crazy. I'm glad you stayed calm." Another deputy, Maria, said, "You handled it with grace, but you shouldn't have had to deal with it in the first place." Monique appreciated the support, but deep down, she felt something was still off. She kept thinking about the way Officer Daniels had looked at her. It wasn't just that he didn't know who she was. It was something else. It was the way he assumed, right away, that she didn't belong. That night, Monique sat in her apartment, with a cup of tea looking out the window. The city lights sparkled in the distance. Cars passed below. It was quiet, but her thoughts were loud. She thought about her early days in law enforcement, the training she had gone through, the oaths she had taken. She remembered how proud she felt when she got her badge. But she also remembered the challenges, the way some people had doubted her, the extra steps she had to take to prove herself. And now, years later, even after earning respect in her role, she had still been treated like a problem just for whispering a kind word. She knew this wasn't just about her. It was about something bigger, something deeper. It was about how quickly people make judgments, often without meaning to. It was about the small, quiet moments where bias can show itself. She picked up her phone and opened a blank note. She began to write. Today I was mistaken for a problem when all I did was show kindness. I stayed calm, I showed my badge, but what if I hadn't? Would anyone have listened? She paused, then continued. We wear badges, but we're still human. And people see what they want to see, sometimes before they even know our name. She didn't know yet what she was going to do with those words, but she felt they needed to be written. The next morning, she planned to meet with her department's community outreach team. She wanted to start a conversation, maybe a training session, maybe a discussion group. She didn't want to punish anyone. She wanted to change something, because if her experience could open a door, even a small one, for understanding and fairness, then maybe that unexpected moment in court had a bigger purpose after all. The next day, Monique arrived early at the sheriff's department. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the air still carried the coolness of the early morning. She walked in with a clear purpose. The events from the day before were still fresh, in her mind. She couldn't ignore them. She didn't want to just move on and forget. Her badge had protected her, yes, but she couldn't stop thinking about the people who didn't have that shield. People who might have been misunderstood, in the same situation, but had no way to defend themselves. That thought kept pushing her forward. She walked straight to the department's community relations office, a small but important part of the sheriff's department. The team worked on improving communication between officers and the public. They also helped organize workshops, talks, and outreach programs. Inside the office sat Captain Rivers, a calm and thoughtful leader in his late 40s. He had worked with Monique on several projects before and respected her deeply. "Morning, Deputy Harris," he said, motioning for her to come in. "Heard about what happened at the courthouse. I was hoping you'd stop by." Monique sat down. "It's been on my mind. I wanted to talk with you about it." "Go ahead," he said, giving her his full attention. She told him everything. How the officer had approached her, how he never asked a single question, how quickly he assumed she was causing trouble. She explained how she had revealed her badge only after being touched, and how the officer had frozen the moment he saw her identity. Captain Rivers nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds like a situation that could have been avoided if he'd just taken a second to listen." "Exactly," Monique said. "I don't want to focus on punishment. I'm not here to shame anyone, but I want to use this moment to start something useful. What if we created a training session or a workshop for officers new to the courthouse or even for the whole department about how to approach people with understanding? Just a pause, just a few questions, could change everything." "Captain," Rivers leaned back in his chair. "You might be onto something." Later that week, a short video clip from the courtroom security camera was reviewed by the department. It didn't have audio, but it clearly showed the moment Officer Daniels approached Monique. It also showed how he reached toward her without hesitation, and how quickly his posture changed when she flashed her badge. The department's leadership decided to meet with Officer Daniels privately. They didn't want to turn it into a public matter, but they understood that a conversation was necessary. During the meeting, Daniels appeared quiet and serious. He admitted he had acted too quickly. "I didn't mean to upset anyone," he said. "I thought I was just doing my job." "You were doing your job," said the supervising officer, "but you forgot the human part of it." Daniels nodded. "I've thought about it a lot. I didn't see her as a person, I saw a potential problem, and I'm not proud of that. Monique wasn't present for the meeting, but she was told about his words later. She appreciated the honesty, even if it came after the fact. A few days later, Officer Daniels sent her a handwritten note through internal mail. It wasn't long, but it was sincere. Deputy Harris, I'm sorry for how I treated you in court. I should have asked, not assumed. I've been thinking about how I reacted, and I want you to know I'm learning from it. Officer Daniels. Monique read the note quietly at her desk. She didn't smile, but she nodded to herself. Sometimes change starts with a quiet apology. Not long after, Captain Rivers called her back into his office. We're moving forward with your idea, he said. Next month, we're launching a new training program called Pause and Ask. It's about approaching situations calmly, understanding context, and remembering that every person deserves respect. Monique felt a weight lift off her shoulders. That's exactly what I hoped for. The program would include real-life role-playing, open discussions, and even guest speakers from the community. It wasn't going to fix everything overnight, but it was a beginning. Outside the department, people had started hearing about the courthouse incident. A few local blogs and news pages wrote short articles about it, without naming anyone. They focused on the lesson rather than the mistake. In one article, the writer said, "A quiet courtroom moment taught us something loud. Respect should come before reaction." That line stuck with Monique. It reminded her that sometimes small moments can grow into big conversations. She decided to speak at a community meeting a week later. It wasn't planned, she was just supposed to attend, but when someone asked if anyone from law enforcement wanted to say a few words, she stood. Up at first, she wasn't sure what to say, but the words came naturally. I wasn't wearing my uniform that day, she told the room, but I was still me. I still had value, I still had a reason to be there. I'm not telling you this story to make anyone feel bad, I'm sharing it because we all need reminders to slow down, to ask questions, and to see each other clearly. People clapped, not loudly, but warmly. It wasn't about applause anyway. It was about connection. After the meeting, an older woman came up to her and said, "Thank you. I've been on the other side of a situation like that. It's nice to know someone in your position understands." Monique smiled. "I understand, and I'm working on making it better." She knew the road ahead was long. Bias didn't disappear overnight, and not every officer would change right away. But something important had happened. A conversation had started, and it was growing. The following weeks passed quietly, but the impact of that courthouse moment was still being felt. Deputy Monique Harris continued with her regular duties, checking reports, helping community members, and doing patrol shifts. But something inside her had shifted. She was no longer just showing up to do her job. She was also thinking about how every interaction, every word, and every look could help shape understanding between people. Meanwhile, the new training program, Pause and Ask, began its early planning. Monique was asked to be one of the leading voices in the sessions. Her story was going to be shared, not as a warning or complaint, but as a real-life lesson. Many officers, both experienced and new, signed up for the workshops. One morning, Monique received a calendar invite for the first session. It was scheduled to take place in a small training room at the downtown station. She looked at the list of attendees. Her eyes paused when she saw one name, Officer Daniels. It gave her a strange feeling, not anger, but something more like hope. She didn't know what to expect from him, but she was glad he was willing to be part of the solution. When the day of the training came, the room filled quickly. There were officers from different departments and ranks. Some were in uniform, some in plain clothes. Monique stood near the front, watching as everyone took their seats. She noticed Daniel sitting near the back, his posture quiet and focused. Captain Rivers opened the session. He welcomed everyone and thanked them for coming. Then he introduced Monique. She stood before the group and took a breath. She wasn't nervous, but she wanted to get her words right. "A few weeks ago," she began, "something happened to me that I didn't expect. I was sitting in court supporting a friend. I wasn't in uniform. I wasn't speaking loudly. But I was still noticed for the wrong reason. The room stayed silent as she shared the story of how she was approached, misunderstood, and nearly removed from the courtroom. I wasn't angry, she said. I was surprised, and I stayed calm. But it made me wonder, how often do we, even without meaning to, make judgments before asking questions? She looked around the room. What if I didn't have my badge? What if I had reacted differently? Would the outcome have been the same? Heads nodded slowly. Some officers looked thoughtful, others looked slightly uncomfortable, but no one seemed bored or dismissive. Her story had touched something real. After her talk, the group broke into smaller teams for discussion. Each team was asked to talk about ways they could improve how they approached people during everyday duties, on the street, in a courthouse, or even during a routine traffic stop. Monique joined a group and listened quietly. She didn't want to lead this time. She wanted to hear what others had to say. One officer, a young woman named Claire, said, "Sometimes I think we move too fast. We're trained to be alert, to be ready, but maybe we forget to pause and read the room." Another officer said, "I've seen people treated badly just because they didn't look like they belonged in a certain place. That's not fair." Monique appreciated their honesty. These weren't perfect answers, but they were real thoughts, and that was the first step toward change. At the end of the session, Captain Rivers brought everyone back together. "I want to thank Deputy Harris for being open with her story," he said. "Let's remember, it only takes a moment to ask a question instead of making a judgment, and sometimes that one moment changes everything." As people began to leave, Officer Daniels walked up to Monique. He waited until the others had stepped away before speaking. "I'm glad I came today," he said, looking her in the eyes. "I've been thinking about it a lot." Monique nodded. "So have I." "I made a mistake," he said, "but I want to learn from it, and I want to do better." "That's all any of us can do," Monique replied. "We learn and then we try to be better every day." They stood there for a quiet moment. There was no tension now, just mutual understanding. Later that week, Monique went back to the same courthouse. This time she was invited to speak at a small town hall meeting hosted in one of the side rooms. The topic was about fairness and respect in public spaces. She walked past the courtroom where everything had happened weeks ago. She paused for a moment, looking through the open doors. People were sitting quietly, waiting for their cases. It looked just like it had that day, but now everything felt different. Inside the town hall room, a group of local residents, court staff, and even a few young students had gathered. They had come to hear about how small actions could lead to bigger change. Monique spoke about what had happened, not to place blame, but to show how easy it is to misunderstand others. She talked about kindness, communication, and the value of simply seeing people as individuals, not as problems. A student raised his hand and asked, "Do you think things really change when you tell stories like this?" Monique smiled. "Yes," she said. "Because stories are how we understand each other, and understanding is the beginning of change." After the meeting, one of the courthouse clerks approached her. "I've worked here for years," the clerk said, "and I've never seen someone turn a moment like that into something so positive. Thank you." Monique thanked her and stepped outside into the sunlight. It was late afternoon and the streets were beginning to quiet down. She looked up at the tall courthouse building one last time before walking to her car. It was just a building, but what had happened inside had started a real conversation, and conversations, when shared honestly, could spread wider than any courtroom wall. Several weeks had passed since the training program began. Deputy Monique Harris had returned to her daily schedule, but something had definitely changed. People inside and outside of the sheriff's department were talking more openly. Not about blame, but about how they could do better. That's all she ever wanted, to help people slow down, ask questions, and treat each other with care. One morning, Monique received an invitation to a special event being held by the County Public Service Committee. The event was a community award ceremony where people from different departments were being recognized for their work in improving public trust and safety. At first, she thought the invite was just for her to attend and support others. But when she arrived, she found out she was one of the people being honored. The room was filled with people from the police department, fire department, local government, schools, and community centers. Everyone was smiling, shaking hands, and sharing kind words. Monique wore her uniform, but it was her calm, quiet presence that stood out most. When her name was called, Monique walked to the front of the room. A member of the committee began speaking. Today we honor Deputy Monique Harris not just for her service in law enforcement, but for her courage to speak up, her kindness in how she handled a difficult moment, and her leadership in helping create better understanding between officers and the people they serve. The room filled with applause. Monique stood there, not seeking attention but truly grateful. She accepted a small award plaque and was given a chance to speak. She looked around the room and said, "I didn't expect any of this. I simply responded to a moment with honesty and patience. I believe that when we talk with each other, instead of reacting too fast, we create space for respect." She continued, "The badge I wear doesn't make me better than anyone. It reminds me of the responsibility I carry, to protect, to listen, and to care. That day in court taught me something I'll never forget. Every person deserves to be seen, not judged." After her speech, many people came up to thank her. One man from a local youth center said, "Your story helped me talk to my students about how to stay calm and respectful, even when others don't see you clearly." Another person from the courthouse staff said, "Since that day, I've noticed more officers taking time to talk to people before stepping in. That's because of you." It felt good to know that her quiet courage had made a real difference. As time went on, the Pause and Ask program continued to grow. Other counties nearby heard about it and asked if they could bring the idea to their departments. Monique was asked to help train officers in different cities, sharing her experience and helping shape a better culture. She met officers from all backgrounds, some who had made similar mistakes in the past, and others who simply wanted to learn. In every training session, she told her story with the same calm honesty. One day, after a session in a nearby city, a young officer approached her quietly. "I was once in a rush and misunderstood someone," he said. "I didn't realize how fast things could go wrong until I saw it happen to someone else. Your story helped me see things more clearly." Monique thanked him and said, "We all learn. What matters most is that we're willing to grow." Back in her hometown, Monique continued building stronger connections with her community. She joined a program that helped high school students understand law enforcement. They called it Behind the Badge, and it allowed teens to talk with officers, ask questions, and even take part in ride-alongs. One of the students, a girl named Tasha, once asked her, "Do you think things will ever be truly fair for everyone?" Monique paused before answering. "Fairness is something we keep working toward. It doesn't happen all at once. But every kind word, every honest conversation, and every moment of respect brings us closer." Tasha nodded. "That makes sense. I want to be a lawyer one day. Maybe I can help from that side." Monique smiled. "We need good people everywhere. If you keep that heart, you'll make a difference." As the months turned into a year, the courthouse event slowly became something that people remembered, not as a problem, but as a turning point. No one forgot what happened, but they focused more on how it led to change. Officer Daniels, the man who had once approached Monique without asking, also continued to grow. He became one of the more thoughtful voices in the department. He even asked to help lead one of the future training sessions. "I learned the hard way," he said during one session. "But I'm better now because I was given a chance to reflect, not be pushed away." Monique and Daniels never became close friends, but they shared a kind of quiet respect. They both knew that the past didn't have to define a person forever. One evening, Monique sat on her porch, watching the sun go down. The sky was painted, with soft orange and purple. She thought about everything that had happened, from that uncomfortable moment in court to all the conversations, changes, and lessons that followed. She knew that challenges would still come. There would still be people who rushed to judge, But now there were also people who paused, who asked, and who listened, and that, she believed, was how real change began. Not with noise or anger, but with calm, steady steps. She sipped her tea, smiled gently, and whispered to herself, "We're getting there, one moment at a time."